Commissioner Pryor, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Ann.
These are trying times in our state right now. At Sandy Hook Elementary School, what happened there? Where were you on Friday when you got the call that something had happened there?
I was doing my duties as Education Commissioner, and I got a call. I was actually at a meeting of the board of the Superintendent's Association of the state, and was engaged in discussions around education policy with the gathered superintendents when I got interrupted and was called out. And it was at that moment unclear precisely what had happened. It was just an early report of a possible shooting at a school.
You did what then?
Well, I sought more details. I asked the aide who was with me and the staff of the Superintendent's Association to see what they could find online, and I placed a phone call. Details were unclear at that point, and soon thereafter I did have to leave the meeting and engage. Went back to my office, started to speak with the head of the Public Protection Division of state government, and we were in coordination, learning about what had happened, and unfortunately, too soon in the process, we learned how tragic it was. It was truly, truly shocking, absolutely devastating.
As Education Commissioner, I would think you would take on some kind of a dad role. You need to mobilize a lot of people. You've got a lot of people dead in a school. What kicks in you as a commissioner? I mean, what do? You are not trained for what happened at Sandy Hook.
No one could possibly be trained for it, and the amazing thing is that so many school personnel who were not trained for anything like it engaged in heroic acts. But those of us who are civil servants, I suppose, aspire simply to respond, to help. And when the news became clearer, and when I was back at my office and working with my team who had all gathered around and we were starting to rally resources, really what we're trying to do is see what we could do to help survivors, what we could do to help family members, what we could do to help the school system. So across government agencies in state government, we began to formulate very, very initial plans to send in crisis workers and grief counselors and other mental health workers instantly. So we were able to rally to the firehouse that's nearby Sandy Hook School and start to surround families with assistance in case it was needed, and begin to interface with the superintendent of schools as quickly as possible. And Janet Robinson and I communicated almost instantly by phone, and then met at the firehouse to begin to see what could be done.
How soon can you wrap your head around this and start to, as you say, mobilize people to start to help Newtown? As Education Commissioner, you've got to start making plans now. I mean, we are laying these children to rest, these 6 adults to rest, but you also have to make plans now in Monroe to get these children in that school, right, and to move forward. How do you do that? Just how do you separate the personal side and the professional side? There's
no way to separate it. I mean, under circumstances like this is so severely tragic. All of us are initially devastated, and then throughout the work, throughout the day, you're stunned, and you're just you are unable for a moment to function. It's just such a terrible, terrible tragedy. But I do think that work is a bit of a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. I think that for our team at the State Department of Education, it's a way to contribute, to try to mitigate, to try to offer these families and these students and these teachers. And speaking of the teachers and the school leaders, these are heroic people who, teachers are already heroes to me. My parents were school teachers, and teachers are giving of themselves for the next generation, but quite literally, we saw heroism in action, and the least we can do is try to see if we can provide the right kind of facilities with the right kinds of counseling, with the right kinds of surrounding services to help them get back to business.
We saw and have heard many of the stories of heroism by teachers, by the front office. When you were down on the ground, are there other stories that you can share with us just about what you saw starting to happen very fast in helping children and teachers mobilizing? Can you share some of those with us?
I've seen the crisis counselors and the mental health workers engage in almost impossible conversations with families who've just been notified of the death of a child. I mean, there's just nothing more penetrating to one's heart. I mean, your heart is broken when you witness it. It's nothing compared to the actual experience of a parent, but it's still, and yet they function and they provide that support. I've seen, frankly, I'm going to shift slightly, but I witnessed the vast majority of Sandy Hook School arrive at a meeting over the weekend to talk about the possibility of coming back to school and to talk about their grief, and it was difficult. It was difficult, but what continuing heroism to be there for the children, even despite one's own issues. Having witnessed such horrific violence and and seeing one's own personal safety threatened. I mean, the teaching profession is a majestic profession, and we've seen it in forms that we should never have to see it. But these are human beings. These are professionals who have the instinct to protect and to provide educational service and to ensure that a child's well-being is first and foremost. And we witnessed that.
What are the thoughts about ever opening that school again? It's early on, but as educators and as leaders, what do you start to think about? Is it a new school somewhere? Does that school get bulldozed? Is it a memorial garden? I mean, what begins to take shape now?
All of the above has been contemplated, and it's certainly not the state's decision. It is very, very much a local decision as to what the disposition of that school will be. I know that there's been some preliminary debate and discussion. I know it also has not been resolved yet. What's been the focus of attention is, where is the new Sandy Hook School to be? Where is the new facility to be? And the town of Monroe stepped up in an instant and marvelous way. And there was a mothballed school that they made available. We played a very minor role in that. The State Construction Services Department and the Fire Marshal and members of the State Department of Education just helped walk through the school to see whether it was feasible. It has to be. It was a middle school. It needs to be adapted for elementary school use. Now there's an unbelievable effort going on with all kinds of volunteerism from the town, from contractors, from citizens to help get the school outfitted. And as I understand it, they're proceeding apace. It's a fantastic thing. And then someday they'll figure out what to do with the original Sandy Hill School after the police investigation is through and the community has a chance to heal just a bit.
You talked to me about living very near Ground Zero around 9/11 and getting involved and helping. And I can't imagine living 2 blocks away and going through what you went through. This is on many scales just as horrific when you have these small children that have been killed. Talk to me about what you saw mobilizing on that day and in the days after.
On 9/11.
9/11, and is there any comparison at all that you can draw?
I mean, in both cases, what you saw was an outpouring of support from not just around the state, not just around the country, but around the world. People, I mean, my phone line is endlessly filled with people suggesting what can be done. People want to send teddy bears. People want to send materials to rebuild the school facility. I mean, it's the entire array. People want to volunteer, and it's just the best human impulses come out under the worst tragic conditions. And of course, none of us would ever wish for these conditions. And having been through different disasters, and no one can draw parallels between them. It's impossible. They're so different and so tragic in different ways. But you always see the best in humanity come out, and the human spirit prevails. And I do think that it's really divinity emerging in the midst of this horrific experience. And it's always a wondrous thing to see how a community rallies, and it's surrounded by concentric circles by the state and the country and the world, and it gets back on its feet. The losses are never to be fully recovered from, and are always to be remembered, but a community can become immensely strong as a function of this. And we're certainly seeing that in Newtown. I have to tell you, there was a full faculty meeting. The entire district's teachers And not just teachers, but school counselors, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians, all in the high school auditorium yesterday. And Dr. David Schoenfeld, who's a renowned expert in crisis in schools, and the superintendent of schools, Janet Robinson, and I addressed the audience, and the head of the American Federation of Teachers, who's a terrific leader in his own right. And there was a point in time when the union leader actually asked everyone in the room to lock arms and to acknowledge that we were one community. And Tom did just an unbelievable thing, I think, symbolically generating that feeling. But also, I think, to see teachers embrace each other who hadn't seen each other since the horrific events, and to hear the positive energy about getting back up and running for children. Now, absolutely grappling with issues. I mean, teachers and, for that matter, bus drivers and custodians were all talking about the issues that they're experiencing and the challenges and the severe strain. And some seeking counselors who were available to them from the state, from other agencies. But the determination on the whole to serve children, remarkable. And I will tell you, Janet Robinson, the superintendent, she is grace under pressure. She represents poise under impossible conditions. She's barraged from every direction, and she's managing to lead and consider all the different options and proceed, for example, with reopening of school today, which was a challenging decision.
Absolutely.
But it feels like the right one. The schools were, with many, many challenges, plenty of complexity, and a lot more work to do to ensure that they're feeling comfortable. They were operational today.
How, going forward, and this discussion is going on in every classroom, every school system across the country, how do we teach when we have to worry about such things? Now, on this scale, this has never happened to this magnitude, except for if we want to talk about Virginia Tech and a few other places. But how do you be an educator and worry about, oh my gosh, I've got to protect my kids? I mean, how is this changing so rapidly? And how do you, as a school system in the state of Connecticut, go forward and make this work? We talked to some Quinnipiac students today who are studying to be teachers.
Yes.
And they talked about heroism, that they would do anything for their kids. But how do we rewrite the booklet on how to teach these days? How do we do that?
Well, I think, as to the safety concerns, the reality is that in a free society, there will always be the possibility of something as absolutely astoundingly horrific as this. But we will have to take more precautions. But whether it's Columbine or Virginia Tech or a movie theater showing Batman, there are just astounding variables that exist in society. And what we need to do is protect the best we can. And we need to ensure that, especially at schools, we have the most safe environment possible. And then within that environment, we need to help our teachers be equipped to deal with such a tragedy when it is on the airwaves, even beyond, certainly beyond Sandy Hook School in the Newtown district, and then all the districts of Connecticut and well beyond throughout the country. Teachers are also grappling not just with physical safety, but with how to help their students process these impossible to process events. So we actually, with this expert I referenced, Dr. David Schoenfeld, we circulated just written prompts, talking points that teachers could use if they so chose in order to bring conversation about with their students at the elementary level as well as in the secondary school level, if they thought that was the right thing for them. We surrounded the schools involved in Newtown with mental health counselors so that there would be places to refer students, but also so that the staff of schools, if they needed a moment, if they needed to seek some guidance, they could find it. These are the steps that we need to take to ensure that we get there.
What else is going to happen, do you think, as we move ahead in the weeks and months to come in the state of Connecticut? What else is going to change as far as schools and teaching in light of what happened at Sandy Hook?
Well, I have to tell you, I hope that we value teachers and education even more. Now, I don't mean to trivialize the the violence and the trauma of the event, and the fact that we have to deal with that very thing. And as I've mentioned, I think we do have to think about even greater ways to enhance school safety and security. But for me, look at what teachers are capable of.
They were first responders.
They were first responders, and look at what they're doing right now. Coming back to school, to me, it's also a heroic act to be coming back to school on the Tuesday following and greeting students and putting on the smile on the face and instructing and helping guide young people. And I know that from personal experience, having been through 9/11, I know that, and nothing in comparison as an experience, but I know how it feels to get to work as part of recovery. But still, it takes a lot of discipline and of determination to come in to these school facilities and help these young people when you're trying to help yourself.
So many people that were killed in the first place. What can we do as a state, from what you saw on the ground at Sandy Hook? How can we best help Newtown and the school system there? Because everybody wants to do everything,
right.
And the flowers are coming, and the food, and the teddy bears. What can we do as this wanes? What do we need to do, and what are they asking you for?
Well, I do think that a couple of responses. I do think that we need to maintain a commitment as a state society, as a Connecticut society, to the mental health services and the other resources that families of the victims, that teachers and other educators who were witnesses and were participants unwittingly, that they need. We need to make sure that those services are there. And under Governor Malloy, the commitment is definitively there. And the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and the Department of Children and Families and the Department of Public Health are all working with the Department of Education and with the local jurisdiction agencies to make that happen.
We've got to make sure the monies are there now more than ever.
More than ever. And we need to make sure the charities do have sufficient monies to do it. But I also think that we have to rally around our teachers and other educators. I know I keep coming back to this point, but I do want to make it again in this way. I think that teachers are not valued sufficiently in society. We are putting great burden on our education system in trying to reform it and improve it, and I'm in favor of that direction, of trying to ever excel even more to help our students have a brighter future. But teachers feel that burden when we try to engage in that kind of reform and that kind of improvement. And teachers, I'm not sure that we value teachers the way we do lawyers and doctors and bankers. If we did, the salaries would be higher. Teachers don't do it for the salary, but the salaries would be higher. And I don't think we yet equate teaching with those professions on the highest tier the way a Singapore does, or a Finland does, or a South Korea does. I think part of what we can do in response to this is thank our educators for creating
every day
these opportunities for young people, and to really dedicating their lives. We would never expect them to put their lives on the line, and we saw that in some instances here, remarkably, some educators heroically. But every day they give of themselves, give of their professional lives, and I think that's the main thing that we can do as a Connecticut community.
Commissioner Pryor, I can hear the passion in your voice. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.